I've been given a very limited time this evening, and so I prepared these binders for you with a lot of exhibits, as well as a letter, or a summation letter that I'll try and go through quickly tonight, which will reference the documents in there as backup and supporting documentation. I did those so you can go through those later whenever you have time. Hopefully you've been able to read them. It'll be great if you have, but if not, you can go back through at your leisure and reference it all, because it's all very important. I'd like to say that I'm going to hit the serious parts, but unfortunately all this is very serious and very widespread. This has been ongoing for a couple of years. I'll apologize in advance too if I stutter or seem nervous or double talk, because I am very nervous. I do not like speaking in public. I'm very private and I'm shy, and this is difficult for me, but it's so important that I'll get through this, so if you'll bear with me on some of it. If I missed something or you didn't or wasn't clear, please just stop me, interrupt me. I'll be happy to explain in more detail any of it. Just here's a copy of all the documents that were emailed with the letter I'll go through, and the exhibits that I'll be referencing.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to give you very quick and brief background, because I'm going to go through as much of this as quick as I can. The property was purchased about 3 years ago by an entity, TPRLFG LLC, which I am one of the managing members of and one of the shareholders in. We cleaned up the property, made it a very nice, comfortable, beautiful, safe place for people to live. Things there were great. People enjoyed living there for about a year. We even worked with some social programs, and I'm proud to say we were able to take a couple of homeless off the streets and put them into nice apartments, and it was great. I'll go more into that in a little bit, but a little background on myself. I said my name's Tony Strout. I'm 60 years old. I have 3 grown kids. I've been very fortunate financially in my life. I'm retired, and at this point in my life, I want to leave the world a better place for my kids and future generations. So I asked myself, what can I do to help accomplish some of that? I've been involved in real estate and rentals my whole life, and so 3 or 4 years ago I decided with the shortage of housing in San Diego and affordability that maybe I could help there. So what I started doing is getting involved in buying dilapidated, run-down, neglected properties, revitalizing them, making them a great place for people to live. We might go overboard in some of the things we do, because that's what we want to do, is give people a nice, comfortable place. About 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Rick Zeiler, said, hey, I got a property in Escondido. It's exactly what you like to do. Would you be interested? I said, let's take a look. So came up, take a look at the property. That's the property in question here tonight. And it was just what I do. The property had been completely neglected. I'm not sure if anything had been done in 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years to the property. So I had never done a property in Escondido. In the last 3 years, I've done or am involved in properties in San Diego, Lemon Grove, National City, Santee, Lakeside. I do them all over the place. And the first thing I do is I talk to the cities. I work with the cities as to what their rules are, how they want things done, what they'd like to see. So before we bought the property, I went into the city and I talked to the senior city planner, Ivan Flores. And we'll get more into that. I'll keep going here a little bit. Time's flying. Shortly after this, maybe a year later, Rick Zeiler was in talking to the city, as he comes in quite often to talk to them about different projects and properties he has here. And he was expressing how great this property looked that we had done. And Mr. Jacobson was there and overheard the conversation. Coincidentally, within a day or so, Mr. Jacobson shows up at our property and immediately went on a campaign against the property. I've never experienced anything like this in my life where a public official would try and use his power to intentionally and maliciously harm someone. But we'll go through and I'll let you draw your own conclusions there. Mr. Jacobson and I use his name because what we're going to go over tonight is the notice and issued by Mr. Jacobson, and there's been several things that he's done and sent to us. So you'll hear that come up quite a bit. And he's tried several things, he's changed his mind on things, and when everything else failed, he went to health and safety. And you'll hear why as I go through and I present a lot of my documents as to why it's health and safety, because that's the last little straw that he can grasp at to try and effectively take away our property and financially harm us. I'll go to my letter, but before I even begin, I'll point out in here, the city provided a 240-page staff report just prior to the original scheduled hearing, and the city attorney, I'd asked for the information so I could prepare a response in my appeal, and they said, no, you'll get it just prior to the hearing as legally entitled to. And so instead of responding to that, I created a response to the violation letter, and that's what most of this is about. I did take a brief moment at that time and go through there, and I made a couple comments on there, and I tried to use some of the things in their own report to show that they're actually proving what we're saying. And you'll see that in one of our exhibits in there, and I'll reference it when we get to it. But before I even go there, the city in their report on page 216 lists the same thing I did here, and that's of the Article 20 Property Maintenance Code, Section 6-48, of what is required to issue this notice that Mr. Jacobson did. And virtually none of it was followed at all. He needed, and I'm reading now from our letter, I'm on page 1 there if you guys want to follow along, because with the time I am going to skip an awful lot in my presentation. I really wish I could go through everything and even more detailed. I tried to make this as brief as possible, and I know if I don't skip 3/4 of it, I won't get through it. But it says he's to mail a copy, wasn't done. A statement advising that if the required work is not commenced within a time specified, the building official will proceed to cause the work to be done. That's not only in the Escondido Municipal Code, that's California state law. If we don't do it, the city has an obligation to do it to retain the tenants in the property. This was not done. A statement advising the notice and the order will be recorded against the property in the office of the county recorder. This was not done. No statement was issued. The notice and order amended the notice shall be mailed by certified mail. This was not done. In their 240-page report, there is no documentation in there showing any of that. On top of that, the person who did all these things has to do a sworn affidavit. And Mr. Jacobson knows what needs to be done, because I found earlier where he had done it exactly as it's supposed to be, but in this case, he didn't do any of this. So there was no actual notice effective or notice served upon us. It also says if the violations are not corrected within a reasonable time, the building official shall file in the office of the county recorder a certificate legally describing the property and certifying that a public nuisance exists on the property and the owners have been notified. Even as of today, no notice has ever been recorded. It has not been done. We had asked that everything be stopped because of the renegade things going against us, and that it was going to harm all the residents of the property. And we were continuously told, no, not stopping anything. In doing all this research, we did find that upon filing an appeal, it is a requirement that there's immediate stay of all action. The city has refused to stay any of the actions in this. In the staff report, you know, I did get it. It's attachment 27, where I made a couple comments. I have a lot more now because I've had time to go through it. But again, I'm just going to go through my report and my attachments today. But you'll also see, because I couldn't get anything provided from the city, I filled out a PRA requesting information that I have the legal right to get, such as emails between them, meeting notes, photos, all kinds of documents, and they had 10 days to do that. They didn't. Then they asked if they could have an extension of time. They didn't. It's been months. They didn't. They finally closed it out. And what I requested was all communications, notes, statements, affidavits, photos, records, emails, discussions, and records of the property. and dates. Between, I named about 5 individuals, and I said planning, zoning, building, environmental. They supplied some documents finally. When at the time we had the hearing, they still hadn't, but then they did shortly thereafter, like the next day. But then they put on here, closed, the City of Escondido has received your public records request. After research and analysis has been determined there are no responsive records associated with your request. None, I guess, exist. But yet, then I was, finally got recently a log, redacted of course, of Mr. Jacobson and his chronological from when the code case was opened and it states numerous emails in here and all kinds of stuff that were not provided that didn't exist, but they're in here, and I have copies of this if you guys would like it, with the highlighted section showing what Mr. Jacobson himself put in there. You might want to hand those out while I keep talking here. Oh boy. Okay, so I'm going to go through here and kind of, I'm going to start skipping a lot of this. I really hope you go through and read this later on your own. I hope I've made it clear enough and backing up with those documents. But there's 16 violations listed in the notice. The first 2 of which really have nothing to do with health and safety, but really are the basis behind all of this and the driving force behind it. So I debated whether I cover those, leave them, but I think I need to some degree. So, sorry. So yeah, I'll jump to the middle of page 3. As we went through this, we responded to his first notice and his second. And you'll see very detailed responses to each and every one of the items, along with proof that the items did not exist or could not be determined, and asking, like for example, a couple of them, we can't find these items anywhere on the property. We've gone round and round. Please tell us where. Please tell us where. Never, and I put in here 7 weeks, did we get a response. We've sent this out. Eventually we sent it out to the planning department, the building department. We finally then, the city attorney's office, we went to the city council, we went to the mayor. Every one of the emails we sent, we said, please acknowledge receipt. Everyone please acknowledge receipt. Not one response. Not one response to tell us, where are these things that we cannot find? You would think if this is such an emergency and a threat to public health and safety, you would think I'd get an immediate response. Here's where this problem is. Here's where this electric wire failure is. Go fix it, because we put in there, we will correct it immediately. We'll be out there immediately and correct it. Nothing, not one response. So who is really causing a public harm, health and safety issue here? You'll see in Mr. Jacobson's own documents that he says, yes, they kept sending to everybody numerous emails to numerous people throughout the city. Still no responses to this date. Now it's been, what, 12, 13, 14 weeks? Still don't know. But you'll see in our records, in attachment 14, we hired an independent inspector to go out, since we couldn't find anything, to search every unit and verify the statements that Mr. Jacobson was saying that we were violating that are in fact not a violation. And I'll get to those as quickly as I can here too, and we'll go through it. Mr. Jacobson swore out a sworn affidavit to the court to get a search warrant of the property, including stating, and I listed numerous lies that were put on that warrant, including the fact that there is a written complaint, and that's why he was doing this and why he showed up. We asked for that. We've asked for it under PRA. It's not been provided. In his second letter, all of a sudden the word written complaint's gone. Now it's just a complaint. Never existed. He did all this just to be malicious and under false pretenses got a warrant to search the property, which there would be no issue in searching the property because there's nothing wrong there. But again, based on past history of Mr. Zeiler and Mr. Jacobson, he knew that he would come up and make false accusations, which is what happened. So I'm going to read just part of this here. Mr. Jacobson had complete plans because I personally went over them with him. He says he didn't know anything there, wasn't sure what was there. After obtaining a warrant to search the property, Mr. Jacobson again fabricated lies and false statements, false accusations, slander against us as the owners of the property and the property itself. We provided detailed responses to this in every single one of his items, which we'll go through tonight. And you'll see that is attachment number 8 in your binders as to our response to every single one of the items. And again, I'm gonna jump through a lot of this here. So before we start to address the notice, let's get into it. Items 1 and 2, again, really weren't health and safety, but it's how all this we got here. There, at the property, there are 7 residential rental units and 3 rental commercial units. And Mr. Jacobson decided we shouldn't have 7 units. He flat out told me, he goes, I'm never going to allow you to have 7 units. What a code compliance officer has to do with what we have or zoning or building, I'm not quite sure. But a response was sent stating this is an incorrect to number 1. It says, and it's on the board, and we'll go through these through our presentation here one at a time. I'll read briefly through it, but up to 5 residential units and storage rooms that were constructed without the required building department review and permits. We sent a response stating that this is an incorrect statement as there have been no construction, additions, or alterations. Mr. Jacobson is fully aware of this as I met with Mr. Jacobson over a year ago on October 23rd, 2023. I went through the entire property layout with him. I brought plans, I brought floor plans. I went through the entire building site. I walked him through everything and answered every question he had about the property. He knew intimately exactly what was there, even though he states in his affidavit he didn't. He knew everything about every property, and that 7 units existed, their configuration, and I have that, and I have him acknowledging that here in one of my clips. Let me get to that. This would be number 7, where I expressed health and safety too.
In those individual units, is there just one way in, no egress, no back door, or just in through the wall?
Yeah, there's just in.
And a window?
There's windows.
Okay, so they have a one-way in, but they have an emergency window for egress?
Yeah.
Through the bedroom or whatever?
Bedrooms and living rooms have windows. So I went through, because we're going through the floor plans, he's asking, is there only a front door? Is there a window? Like, health and safety is number 1. And I say health and safety is number 1. But then I went further with Mr. Jacobson about how long the units have been there, because they've been there since before we purchased the property. And that's clip number 6.
Get you in.
Okay,
you're in.
We're here.
So planning will give you all the details regarding. So, and if Rick says you bought it and then you just improved it, but those conversions were already made, I believe you. I've known Rick for years.
And then clip number 5, please. He acknowledged that the units had been there forever.
And did you get it? Excuse me for one more thing. Did you get a copy of the assessor's records for the 2 properties?
I have something, but
it's clearly defined. So there's 2 properties portion of the unit.
Right.
825, which is the house and the 2 units. They've been there forever.
Right.
And it was a house and 2 units. So we're really not too concerned about that. It is the 333, and you can see the structure was built in, original structure was built in 1970.
Right. So again, he acknowledged that it was built in 1970. He acknowledged that there was 3 units at the property. Later he changes it to 2. I think you can clearly hear that. And this is over an hour I spent with him, and I have the full hour, but obviously we don't have time to play that, but you're welcome to it, and I can forward it to anyone who would like it. This is why our conversations continued after all this while we were there. And he asked us to submit plans to clear everything up, as-built plans to clear everything up. I had discussed with him that I'd already told by the city staff on April 22nd, 2022, before we bought the building. I went into the city, as I told you earlier, to discuss it with the senior planner, Ivan Flores. And in our discussions, you know, we talked about the 7 units that were there. He told us what we could do, what we couldn't do, that those units were there. They were legal non-conforming units. Play clip number 1, please. We'll just go through these really quickly, and then I'll explain it all again.
I just want to know, so basically what's there and being used as residential, we can continue to use as residential, we just can't spend more than 25% of the
replacement cost.
Okay, so as long as we do that.
And you wouldn't lose non-conformity. The only way you would lose non-conformity is if you were to exceed this 25% and there was a lapse in the use.
So lapse in use, and you'll see what Mr. Jacobson, his motivation of trying to kick out our tenants. And you'll also hear from Mr. Flores about health and safety is the only other way that we would lose our use of the 7 units that were legal non-conforming units there. So would you play clip number 2, please?
Non-conforming use is that it's going to eventually fade out, you know, but that doesn't mean that you're...
It doesn't need to fade out during anyone's lifetime or the next lifetime.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So that we can continue to have the property as legal non-conforming use. And I'll play another clip here in a second, although I'm running out of time. And you'll hear, go ahead and play clip 3, but I said in quotes, we're buying it.
I guess that's my biggest question, the fact that it does say 1, and things are different than what's on here.
Yeah.
I mean, they've changed stuff around in here, and this is 2 units and everything else, and has been for who knows how many decades. So what happens with that? Because it's been used that way. Are you guys going to go back and say, nope, you can't have those 2 apartments there anymore. It's now offices, even though it's been that way for probably 40 years.
I think we would have to do this part right here.
Notwithstanding the provision, may determine that the non-conforming status exists for residential, commercial, industrial property. Even to permit.
Even though the
Okay.
application is not available.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because it's built prior to 7 years, so we'd be okay then. All right.
Well, the director would have to make that determination.
Yeah.
But, you know, the findings, right, is that it doesn't create a public nuisance.
Right.
Doesn't create a public nuisance, and that's where he went. And in the tape, if I played all of it, you'll hear, I asked him, I said, look, we're buying it, and I don't want to open up a can of worms. I'd rather know now and not buy it. If there's going to be any issues with having the 7 units, I'll not buy this property. And I was assured by Mr. Flores, no, it's fine, it's legal non-conforming as long as you don't violate these statutes. Did we play clip 4? I don't know that we played that one.
All this area here, and then there's 3 commercial.
Right. Okay, so
That's what's there.
So on the property, we have 7 total dwelling units, 3 commercial units.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the conversation with Mr. Jacobs when I went in to see him. I'm sorry, I'm a little out of order there on some of this. After having the conversation with Mr. Jacobs about the 7 units, we can continue to use it as non-conforming units. We decided anyway, go ahead and prepare the plans to not only make the 7 legal non-conforming units permanently legal and go forward that way, but in addition, we would be allowed to add 2 additional ADUs under the state laws, which I've provided you copies of attachments 9, 10, and 11, which is Assembly Bill 2221, Senate Bill 897, and Senate Bill 1226. And under those,
And solar.
and under those, and we submitted those plans February 13th, 2024 to the city. The city never approved those plans, nor did the city ever deny the plans. Instead, they sent an email that says, oh, we're not sure if we can accept your plans. I don't know what they mean by not sure they can accept our plans. Under state law, they have to take our plans in. They have the right to decline and reject our plans, deny our plans, or approve our plans. State law is very clear. If they don't approve the plans in 60 days, or they don't deny the plans with a detailed list of the conditions that would make them acceptable, the plans are deemed approved by the state of California. So we now have, whichever way you want to look at this, we have our 7 legal non-conforming units that we can continue to operate per the city indefinitely as long as we don't violate terms, or we have 7 legal units and the right to build our 2 additional ADUs. even on top of that, even if we didn't have either one of those two things, if you read those 3 attachments and assembly bills, we have the right to have these units, and we could still submit and have these units, even if they didn't already exist and hadn't been there. I'll read just a couple of these inserts. I listed 12 of the things in just one of the bills, in Bill 897. The other 2, they're in there, they're highlighted. You can go through some of the things that are pertain, you can read the whole bill. But the bill would also prohibit a local agency from denying an application for a permit to create an accessory dwelling unit due to the correction of non-conforming zoning conditions, building code violations, unpermitted structures that do not present a threat to public health and safety. There we go, public health and safety again. Unpermitted structures that do not present public health and safety. It's in there multiple times. If the unit accessory was constructed before January 2018, we've heard from the planner, we've heard from public records, we see public records in there, we've heard from Mr. Jacobs himself. It is very clear, and everyone acknowledges it was built long before January 1st, 2018. Accessory dwelling units shall not be required to provide fire sprinklers if they are not required in the primary residence, which they aren't here. Permitting agents shall either approve or deny. I've already read that part. You can look at it. Local agencies shall approve the processes with only ministerial provisions for the approval of the accessory dwelling unit. You can see in his email, they want a major plot plan. They want all kinds of things that are illegal to ask us or require us to do, although they never even accepted our plans. I'll let you read some of the other ones, but it says multiple accessory dwelling units within the portions of an existing multifamily property dwelling structure, which clearly it is. Everyone admits it, whether it's 2 units or 3 units or whatever it is, that are not currently used as livable space, including but not limited to storage room, boilers rooms, passageways, garages, attics, basements, can be made into accessory dwelling units. Again, wow. Okay. I'm going to have to let you just go through yourself, and we'll just jump ahead several pages here. The Health and Safety Code of Section 17980.12, I've listed it here, and it says that we can request, if the units were constructed before 2020, we can request a delay in enforcement of anything, which we obviously, you'll see emails we have, was not granted. I'll keep going here. Number 2, it's the same as number 1, so I'm not even going to go through that. Now we'll get into the real health and safety, which really should have been the only things on here, which are items 3 through 14. And does that say 2 minutes?
1 minute 55.
Okay, I'll go really quickly through. The walls that separate the dwelling units from each unit were constructed without the required fire-resistant partitions. How Mr. Jacobson determined that, I'm not sure. You'll see in your binders, we have photos that show that it's 8-inch cinder block walls for most of them. Anyone can tell that's fire rated. In addition to that, the walls that separate units 1 and 2 and 5 and 6, I listed in here the codes where, based on the time of construction, it wouldn't be required to have it. But even not having to require it, we went through and we did destructive testing to see, is it a 1-hour firewall? It actually is. We have photos and videos in here that show it's double 5/8 inch drywall. How he determined it wasn't and made a statement of fact that it wasn't 1-hour firewalls when all the walls are. It's been proven and verified and turned in here. Again, not much time. False walls installed between units 7 and 9 that block the electrical panel. The city's municipal code as well as SDG&E code require 36-inch clearance. You'll have photos in here that show that there's 41 inches of clearance in between the meters and the wall. There is no violation there. Multiple areas missing fire restraint construction. I'll go through it quickly. When Mr. Jacobson came through with his second warrant on October 17th, we walked past the hall and I said, the only spot of drywall or stucco we could find missing is in this corner storage room. And you can see the repairman already patched that. Is that the only area? He goes, yes, that's the only area. So there never was multiple areas, and he clearly saw at that date that it was already corrected, although his October 31st letter said it wasn't, just like everything else. The most disturbing one of all, and I hate to use up all my time here, but is the gas leak.
And Mr. Struck, your time is expired. If you want to finish this last thought, and then we can turn it over to questions from the commission after that. If you want to finish your last thought.
Sure. So number 6 here, gas leak. So this is the one that's most disturbing of anything to me. When we got the letter October 31st and saw that it said there was a potential gas leak there, we assumed that Mr. Jacobson had already called SDG&E and or the fire department or someone to make sure that it didn't create a huge hazard. Well, we called it SDG&E within 10 minutes of getting the letter before we did anything else. They immediately dispatched a crew. Come to find out, they did find a gas leak. It was next to a water heater. The water heater has an open pilot light flame. Mr. Jacobson never called anyone. You want to talk about public health and safety? So here I thought that he risked 7 families' lives plus anyone else in the area by having an open gas leak and doing nothing about it for 2 weeks. Well, then when I got this document that we handed you, you'll see in his notes here, it wasn't 2 weeks, it was 2 months previously he discovered a gas leak, never said anything to anyone on it. SDG&E immediately fixed the gas leak, but the hazard existed for 2 months. And there's no way I can get time to another 5 or 10 minutes just to go through these items.
The 30 minutes is what was ascribed, but the chair and the commission will be able to ask questions that might lead to other information on your presentation.
And I'm still not clear where it said I only had 30 minutes to present my appeal. I mean, the city provided 240 pages of documents. I have well over 400 pages, and I'm supposed to give, originally I was told 10 minutes.
Is there something that says that it's 30 minutes?
No, there isn't anything in the code that stipulates the time. So we had discussed it previously that initially we were thinking of like a 10 or 15 minute presentation, but at the direction of the city attorney's office, they wanted to give you ample time. So 30 minutes is what we described, and that's what we afforded to Mr. Strzok. So it's up to the chair.
I'm not able to finish my presentation or my defense of my appeal.
I believe the way it'll work is that the chair and the commissioner is going to be able to ask questions which might lead to other elements of your presentation that you could
Okay, but it's still not my presentation or
Correct.
my defense to the appeal.
Correct, because we did agree 30 minutes ahead of time.
Who's we?
We had notified you ahead of the meeting at
As
30
a
minutes.
notified.
As a point of order, Zach, can I just state that since the chair has returned to the meeting, I think he can take up the gavel, so to speak, to run the meeting just as a point of order.
And I
because
do
know we have a vice
appreciate
chair.
you helping in my absence, and my apologies to everyone for the delay. And I do want to thank you for taking the time to do a lot of work to put your thoughts together and present. And I think, speaking for everybody, we appreciate the effort that you put into this. And I think I'm in agreement that through the questions that we ask you, maybe we can give you further opportunity to clarify yourself through these questions that we'll ask. And at that point, I would ask the board that's here, are there questions that you have specifically on the presentation that would be aimed towards Mr. Strzok regarding his presentation? Are there specific questions you have?
Perhaps, and Zach, you can tell me this is out of order. Could I ask Mr. Strauch what the next part of his presentation might be, or is that maybe a little bit too much of an open-ended,
What I think we don't want to do is turn the 30 minutes into more than 30 minutes, but if you do have specific questions, and I'll just kind of maybe prompt that a little bit, because I wrote down notes as you spoke, Mr. Strzok, and I tried to summarize what your points were. So I will have questions that I will ask you, and I think you'll appreciate that will afford you some further explaining, okay? So if you have further questions that relate specifically to the presentation, that would be great.
I don't think I have anything that comes to mind as of yet. Perhaps just one area of clarification. This has been going on since October 2023 or before that?
Before that.
Gotcha. 2022, I saw.
Well, I went in and saw him in, I believe it was July of 23. 2023. I don't want to give you a wrong date here, and haven't got to here, but there is one correction of a date on here that I was going to do, but we haven't got there yet, so one of your dates in here will be incorrect. Let's see here. When did I see Mr. Jacobson?
27.
August 23rd, 2023 is when I went and saw him. It started before that. He contacted and said he wanted me to come in and meet with him to go over this, and that's why I went in there and met with him.
Any additional questions?
Not yet.
Okay. I have a couple questions. I just wanted to try to summarize your arguments, and let me clarify me if I am. Okay. So, one of your arguments, and you went through a few points regarding the idea that the violation was not properly carried out. So I think that's one of the arguments you're making is, hey, they didn't properly carry out the violation notice. And we don't have to go into all of those points specifically, but is that one of your arguments?
So what I'm just stating that as a fact, and what I would have added to there, but I cut it all out, was the fact that, look, even though there really isn't anything because it was never served and there shouldn't be an appeal, I want to go through this. We've been constantly barraged and harassed, and I needed to stop. And so I want to go through this anyway, and I want to do my presentation, and that's what you would have found there. But it's showing that there was no effective legal notice whatsoever, legally. But I wanted to go through this. I don't want it stopped, because I could have just said, let's just stop this, and that's not what I wanted.
I appreciate that. So I have 4 points.
Yeah.
And the first was, I believe you're stating that, hey, the violation notice wasn't properly carried out, is your assertion. Number 2 being, you were unable to find the items that were in violation. The items that they noted, you went back and said, hey, I can't find those things. That's the second one I noted. The third was that, hey, there are no alterations on the property since you purchased it. These alterations predated your purchase of the property. I think that was another point that you made. And the fourth one, that the city didn't intake your plan submittal. And I think you had mentioned that they need to, or it's automatically approved within a certain period of time. So those are the 4 points that I derived from your presentation. Do those sound accurate?
Those 4 do. There is much, much more, but like I said, I couldn't even get to my summation, let alone show I couldn't even go through the 16 items he listed. How you're going to go through those 16 items in 30 minutes is just baffling to me. I mean, it's just amazing. But so if you'll go through your points, I'll address each one of those 4 points. What was the first one
Well,
you'd
you
like me to
did.
address?
You did. You gave detail regarding each of those. I was simply trying to summarize those points.
Well, I think, and I appreciate that, but I think your summation of part of what you're saying, and I was listening to him and let you finish, but it wasn't quite what I was saying. So if you want to repeat them, I'll address each
Sure.
one of them if you want me to.
First is the violation wasn't properly carried out.
Yeah, we addressed that one.
Second, that you couldn't find the items that they listed that were in violation.
Well, what it goes through here is that the listed violations, we either provided proof of every single one of them that they were not a violation, but how do you disprove something that doesn't exist? The fact they said the egress windows aren't proper, I have, and I would have showed it all here, the proof that they do. So we hired an inspector to do that, but how do I disprove it? So
Okay.
items he says that are in violation, I'm like, where are they? Because they don't exist. How can I, if they don't exist, how can I do anything except say, where are they? And they don't exist. That's why he would never respond to them.
Okay. Third one is no alterations were performed on the property after you purchased it. Is that correct?
No. He said that there was construction and additions to the property, and there has not been. And we even went through the plans, and you have the plans, and he showed the plans, and he knows the plans, that nothing has been constructed on that property since the 1970s.
Okay.
You said when you purchased the property, you improved it.
Yeah, we painted it, we put cabinets in, we put new bathroom tile, we changed out fixtures. Everything inside the units was 50 years old. So we completely cleaned it up, made it look like brand new units inside. Absolutely, but we did not construct, we did not do additions as they stated. There has been no new construction on the property.
Did any of that work require permits that you did?
I don't believe any of that work requires permits.
So the accessory dwelling units, they were there before 2020 or?
That is correct, and you can even see in the prints from the building prints, and then there is the city provided a CUP from 1994, I believe, and it shows most of the units there as well.
So, do you have any ADUs on the property at the moment?
Well, you can, whether you're going to classify them, and that's in here too, the city recognized them as legal non-conforming 7 units. And then we submitted plans to call them ADUs, then they would no longer be legal non-conforming, because in legal non-conforming, just like it said in there, that if we stopped using it for a while, we could lose that right. If we did more improvements to the property, we could lose that right. And if we had health and safety issues, we could lose that right.
So they're not ADUs?
So they are now, because we submitted plans to acknowledge them as ADUs, and take them from legal non-conforming to make them legal ADUs. And that's the plans that were submitted to the city.
And I suppose
It isn't,
But the
they're
plans,
not just ADUs because you say they're ADUs. They're either legal units or ADUs, or they're illegal units.
No, if you read the Senate bills and the state laws, we are submitting them as ADUs, as accessory dwelling units.
okay, so what you're saying is that with those ADUs, did you perform any construction on them?
No,
Okay, so you're saying they are the way they are, and that's how they were since before you purchased them?
that is correct.
Okay. Separate question then is regarding the intake, which leads to that point. The intake, which is the 4th point here. You're suggesting that you tried to submit plans for improvements, but the city did not accept the submittal. They didn't intake them. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. They did not intake them.
Okay.
That's what their email said.
Okay.
So, and at the same point, we had already applied for permits for solar and some other. Mr. Jacobson had those permits pulled and put on hold, which he had no right to do either.
Okay, that is helpful. What I would like to do, unless any of the other board members has additional questions to ask Mr. Struck, does anyone have additional questions?
I have an example of the garage conversion. Was that done before you purchased the property or after you purchased the property?
Yes, there are 2 things there. There is a garage that is a 2-bedroom unit, and then there is a carport area that we submitted plans to convert that into 2 additional ADUs. We've never done anything with it because it's enough nightmare, and the city won't recognize it. So if we called to do an inspection, they won't come out and inspect it. So we have done nothing on the construction of that. So no construction has been done by us since we purchased the property.
What about the first garage, that is 2-bedroom unit right now? Was it
That's
done
there.
before, or was it
Yes.
when you purchased it?
Yeah. We've done no construction on the property.
no further questions from my side.
Okay, any other members have questions for Mr.
I
Struck?
have some questions about the recordings that you took. What was the nature of those meetings that you recorded?
The first one was to go in and ask the city, because when I pulled up the records, I thought there was 1 unit there. That's all I saw on the initial thing that I got from the assessor's records. Later it was shown to me, and I understand where there was 3 units on there, but there was 7 units actually at the property. So I went into planning and said, what do you guys show? What do we have? And I went over with them. I said, well, there's 7 units there, and I show 1, and he explained how there's not 1, but there's 3 there, and the same thing Mr. Jacobson came up with, but that they've been operating as 7 units, therefore they're allowed to continue to operate as 7 legal non-conforming units, because they don't even know when they were turned into units.
Okay, so that was a meeting over the counter with the planning
Yes.
department official? Okay,
Yes.
and do you always record your meetings over
Always.
the counter?
Always.
Okay. Were they aware that they were being recorded?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The only person in the city that would not let me record the meeting was when we finally were able, and that's a correction in your statement here, it says I met with one of the city attorneys on October 12th, it was November 12th, and I put my recorder out and said I'm going to record the meeting so that I understand everything happened. She says, no, I will not let you record it. And as the meeting went on, we quickly figured out why she wouldn't let me record it, but that's the only time I was not allowed to record it.
Okay, so in that meeting, you say they said that you have legal non-conforming units?
The senior planner, Ivan Flores.
Mr. Flores. I'm not sure I heard that in the recording. So is it possible he was talking about if you had them,
No.
then you would do this?
No, it's very clear. We can play it again if you like.
And so do you need it to make it a legal non-conforming unit? Is there some kind of document you need to make it a legal non-conforming unit?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
It basically, from what I understood, what he was saying, so the units are there, they've been operated as units. They never had permits when they did it. They don't know when it was done. And so therefore they can operate as legal non-conforming units, which is the entire reason why then, rather than have that question, we went in under the state laws to convert them to permanently recognized legal units. It gives you more rights with your units. And that's what it was submitted under. And the laws say as long as it was built prior to January 1st, 2018, which subsequently now it's January 1st of 2020, then they are legally allowed to stay, period.
But that law only applies if they're ADUs.
No. You could take a storage unit, you could take a garage, you could take a carport, you could take anything you want and convert it into ADUs. And that's what was in there too. And I put that in, it's in the letter and all the backup documentation is
Right, in a residential zone, you can legalize a ADU that was illegally built. That's what that section of the law was about. But this is a mixed-use commercial zone.
Mm-hmm. It also states in the law, you can read it, it says mixed use.
Okay, and then the other thing is for a multifamily site, the city only allows 2 ADUs. But you have
That's
5 additional units.
That's not correct either. I don't argue, you can read the laws, but
Okay.
that you're allowed 2 additional ADUs. A multifamily, you can have, it's unlimited as to what units you can have. You can add 2 additional ADUs. I've done over 300 projects and I deal with cities all the time and I could be mistaken, but yeah, this.
Okay, you could be, and I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah,
the
last thing I'm
I'm
gonna
very
argue.
familiar with zoning laws and building codes and everything else, so you're not going to fool me. I saw you switch between different versions of codes as if they all apply in different areas, and it doesn't really work that way. They're separately applied to each specific thing.
That is correct, and I listed each of the different bills there and how each one applies to this. They each apply in different forms. I didn't combine them, like on the one where I did the 12 things, that's from one bill. That's not combining multiple bills. I said in there and I said in my presentation, you can go look at the other ones, but I certainly don't have time to go through all those. I could go through each item in those 2, and they're highlighted in there, the ones I felt that applied to it.
Okay. I saw you crisscross across different codes, like whether they're legal non-conforming units or ADUs, those are 2 separate issues, and there's 2 separate state laws that apply to those different types of units.
You're correct, there are, but.
All right. Sorry to.
No further,
derail
do you have further questions?
That's all I have for now.
None? I have some questions for you related to interaction with the city.
Mhm.
So back in July is when the notice of violation first took place. There, as you mentioned, there were, as you characterize them, ambiguities and confusion about what those specifically were, whether they were valid. What did you do? What was your process in order to say, okay, look, I've got an item that they're saying I need to fix. It doesn't make sense to me, or I don't understand it. how did you contact the building inspector and say, let's meet on site, help me understand this, let's walk it together? What did you do to further understand so that you could address those items?
So you mentioned July of 2023. The first notice was, oh, you have illegal units. And so that's when I went in there. So that was the issue. Then when it was proven that, no, we don't, and we're fine with that, then later it became, he went out and it's health and safety issues. And that was September 26th when we got a notice of that. And we immediately responded with, addressed each one of his items. I said, here is the proof of each of those items that they do not exist or are wrong. There was 2 of them that needed correcting. I said, one is the neighbor's tree was touching the property and on the roof, so we trimmed it back. I sent photos of it, that it was done, and we corrected that. One, he sent a letter previously that there was someone had illegally dumped trash that overflowed the dumpster and had trash all over the parking lot, broken furniture, TVs, everything else. We immediately, within 24 hours, had that cleaned up. And he kept saying that in all of his letters, that it's still there, even October 31st, when clearly he'd been out to the property no less than 6 additional times and saw that it wasn't there. I have a video of him walking the whole property during one of his warrants, and you can clearly see there is no trash or debris. So, and the third thing was the drywall, which we asked him that's there. The items I'm referring to as the things that we knew clearly were not there, were not violations, and the only way to do it is say, okay, where are these things? Where are these windows that don't meet egress? Where is this that doesn't have that? Where are these electrical wires that are exposed, that aren't exposed? Because we went through, we hired an independent inspector to even go through the property when he wouldn't respond, none of the departments would respond, no one at the city would respond. If you have a health and safety issue and you have someone saying, we've taken care of these the same day. We'll take care of anything. We have a maintenance crew. Our tenants call about small little things that aren't health and safety. You can ask any of them. They're repaired that day usually.
Okay,
so we're saying we'll repair these, but they don't exist, or show us where they are and we'll repair them. You would think health and safety, the first thing they would do is say, here's where you have an exposed wire. Nothing.
So did you call for the inspector to meet you on site to go over?
We called, you'll see more, I've probably put in there a dozen emails. I could probably show you 40 emails. He even acknowledges in his logs that, hey, they're sending this to everybody. He's sending this to multiple people, multiple times. No response, not from a single person, still to this day from the city.
And nobody ever met you at the property to talk about those violations?
Nope, he got a warrant, and I met him out there with one of the warrants, and we went through and I asked him questions. The only question he would answer is, we walked by the hall where I said, this is the only place. He said, you have multiple areas of exposed, open drywall and stucco. I said, this is the only area in this corner of the storage closet we can find, and you can see they fixed it. Are there other areas? No, that's it. Just kept walking. That was it. That is the only question to answer. As far as the windows, for the egress windows, so when I met him on the second warrant, I believe it was October 17th, there was 12 people there to inspect the unit. He had everyone from the city trying to find anything they could.
Let me ask you about that, because my question was, did you reach out to them to invite them to help you walk through and understand this, or did you wait until they obtained a warrant to inspect? Because it sounds like they had to get a warrant to inspect, you did not allow them to inspect. Did you invite them on site prior to that and say, hey, let's just go over this?
No, Mr. Jacobson had went out on site himself. And no, we did not invite him. We had been asking Mr. Jacobs for a year to turn this over to the city attorney and get anyone else involved because of his personal prejudice against Mr. Zeiler. I mean, I couldn't finish going through here, but this is not a 1 year or 2 year, 3 year thing. This is a personal vendetta, grudge, whatever you want to call it, and I don't know why, no one knows why, that Mr. Jacobson has. He has presented other search warrants on other properties of Mr. Zeiler where he has went in with a dozen city officials. Not one thing they could find, not one single thing, but he has probable cause that there's code violations inside these buildings. He went in through all the units, couldn't find one thing. I don't know what the probable cause was, but this is a renegade individual that has harmed so many families and people. He threw these tenants out on the street, which he legally cannot do. The state of California and the city's own municipal code says he cannot evict them. He has the
Okay.
duty and the obligation
My
to
que-
make the repairs.
My question was much smaller. My question was simply, and I think I got the answer. The answer is no, you did not invite him to come out on site to clarify any ambiguities.
He didn't ask to come out on site.
Right, that's not my question.
Oh, no,
My question is if
absolutely
you
we
invited
did.
him to come and clarify that on site.
Absolutely we did. We sent letters and said, what are these? We've offered to do anything. We asked, and I have it on video, I said, when can we meet? I have it on video
Okay,
asking
so you
that.
did invite him.
Oh, I said, when can we meet? When can we go over this?
Okay.
And he goes, the city attorney will be in touch with you and they'll decide who will be in the meeting.
As I understand it, Chairman, if I may, and I, owe everyone here an apology. We were supposed to have this meeting on the 15th. I was not in town. I had it in my calendar on the 10th. So, I know everyone here, your time is valuable and that kind of thing. That's my mistake. I, read through very voraciously because my understanding was that it was a series of email correspondence and that kind of thing. And the when he showed up on site was with the warrants was why he was there.
That according to the timeline record that I read as well, there is quite a bit of time between the first notice violation and the warrant. Is that correct? It wasn't immediate. It was quite a bit of time.
No, the first violation supposedly was because of illegal units. And then all of a sudden it became health and safety. When he exhausted his avenues of, okay, you got illegal units. Then it flipped to health and safety. And then it went straight to a warrant.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Okay, the time, and we can review that timeline. As far as questions, and thank you, because I think you answered my question related to that.
I'm
And
trying to.
I'll just ask one more time before we pose questions to staff. Do any of the board members have any further questions? For the
I have one question. When I reviewed the documents here, there is a reference to, on September the 30th, a response to a notice on the September the 26th, which I could not find in the package. The one I found was October 31st.
Okay, that's a staff question. So
But this is a response to a staff report that was prepared on September the 26th, and I couldn't find it.
we're going to move to that right now, but I just want to make sure there's no more questions for Mr. Struck before we do that. Thank you very much. We may call you up for additional questions if that's okay.
Since I couldn't, I implore you all to read through all of this. I mean, if you don't, I don't know. I really hope you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time tonight.
And Chair Spear, before we proceed to the staff questions, so just for the Commission's edification, there is staff present and available. Deputy City Attorney Brenna Miller is available. She'll answer the majority of questions and can direct other staff. We do have 3 members of the public that wish to speak, so it's your discretion if you want to take them now or after staff questions. Totally your call.
Okay. Why don't we hear? Well, don't forget your questions, if that's okay, for staff. Actually,
And it can happen after. It's not a problem.
What can happen?
We can bring up the public after you.
Why don't
ask
we
staff
do that
questions.
so we can stay on
fresh?
point? Yeah, let's stay fresh with the questions that the board might have for staff. And I'll open it up to the board right now. What questions would you like to pose to staff?
Is Mr. Jacobson here?
Yeah, Mr. Jacobson is here, and then but Ms. Miller from the attorney's office will be the primary point, and she'll be able to direct staff accordingly.
I'm the deputy city attorney in the city attorney's office, and I can direct the questions to our staff who are familiar with the case. So Stephen is here if you have questions for him, code officer.
Are we being told that the questions has to go to the lawyers first and they'll take it to the staff?
No, the staff will come up to answer the questions, just that Brenna is the primary lead on the case, so she's just as here to be able to know which staff members to call forward pertaining to specific questions.
Would you like Stephen to come up?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be Stephen. I think if I can ask the first question, I'd like to hear from the city how they came to be aware of the property and how they proceeded through these code violations?
Sure.
Step by step,
So code
from
can
whoever's
definitely,
most knowledgeable.
code can definitely answer some of those questions, but I can answer the general question. So in July of 2023, the City Code Compliance Division received a complaint about the property. They went to the property. The case was assigned to Code Officer Jacobson. He went to the property, he investigated. He saw that there appeared to be multiple residential units. So he did some investigation and ultimately discovered that there are 5 unpermitted residential units at the property. And he requested to inspect the property multiple times over an 8-month period. Appellant refused multiple times. This might be better answered by code, but I do know that he accused the city code officers of harassment. They refused to let them on the property. So I ended up, our office, seeking 2 inspection warrants for the property so that we could get onto the property and inspect, because we suspected there were unpermitted units. And we needed to determine the extent of the violations at the property. And so I believe I saw the first warrant in September and the second in October. And so on the first inspection warrant, code went out with various city staff, and they were not able to get into all of the units. So we ended up seeking a second inspection warrant to get into the remaining units. And at that point, we were able to determine, the city was able to determine there were seven residential units at the property, 5 of which were unpermitted. If you have more specific questions about the violations.
Unpermitted in terms of like the fire extinguishers, as I remember, the gas detectors.
Sure. So under the Municipal Code, Chapter 6 of the Escondido Municipal Code, it requires permits for any construction, alteration, or conversion of buildings or structures. And it's actually under Section 6, 12.2. It is the failure or refusal to obtain those permits to make those changes is prima facie evidence of a public nuisance. And so that's what I mean by unpermitted. So they have to go, if there are changes at the property, they have to go through the planning division. They start at planning division, they submit plans and applications to permit. And in this case, it would be after the fact because the changes have already been made. But planning can maybe speak better to that process if you'd like to hear from them.
And were the owners offered a chance to remedy the situation, the unpermitted units?
Yes. So in July of 2023, when this was initially discovered and code compliance went out and investigated, it was able to tell that there were some unpermitted units. A notice of violation was issued, which is not sure the number. It's in your staff report attachments. In that notice, the property owners, appellants were told that they needed to submit that application and those plans to the planning division.
Was that done?
No. So they did email, I'm speaking for planning, but please let me know if you'd like to hear from them. But essentially, they emailed plans to somebody in city staff. It was not a formal application. And if you'll look at page 93 of your staff report, it's actually the email that planning sent to the property owners. And this is where I'd like to make a distinction, because appellant was telling you that the city, he submitted an application and the city did not decline or accept it. And so under these ADU laws, it's been deemed approved. There's a distinction there because the city never intook the application. There is not an application. It was never a formal application. When they submitted this, they submitted plans, they emailed plans to a city staff member to convert the carport into 2 additional units. And in planning's pre-review, they do a pre-screening review, which you can ask them more about that process. They saw that the plan showed existing unpermitted units on the property. And so they said, we're not going to intake this application because you have to get these existing residential units permitted. And then in that email, planning informed them of the permit process and gave them a couple of different options as to how to start that. And to this day, appellants have not submitted a formal application for plans to legalize and permit those residential units.
This may be a question for planning, but the 5 units in question, they're all the ones that were built in 1970, no? Or
I think that would be better answered
yes,
by
of course.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oscar Romero, Principal Planner. If you refer to attachment 3, that's what's been permitted, the 2 residential units, the office building, the community service building, and then the ambulance service building. That's the last entitlement, last modification that we have for the property. So there were no additional units permitted as part of this. This is it. Yeah.
I have a question. When was the last permit issued, date-wise, for that building?
It would be part of this 94 CUP permit, which allowed for the ambulance service.
So it was done, all these changes were done to the building before they bought it?
When you say these changes, which changes are you referring to?
Well,
The residential
you're
unit?
saying there were 7 units, over here you say there
There's
were
only
5
2.
are illegal.
Correct. So those, I don't know when they changed from commercial to residential, but they were changed from 94 up until this date, without permits. So they are unpermitted structures or unpermitted conversions from commercial to residential.
And that could have been remedied if,
It can be remedied, as mentioned in the other attachment we have for staff's response in attachment 8, where we state if they want to pursue an ADU, that is an option. However, they do have to remedy the conversion of commercial space or residential space back to commercial space as it originally was. Or if they want to pursue multifamily development at that mixed-use property, they would have to submit for a major plot plan, which neither have been submitted.
They would have to take it back. Sorry.
Sorry, so it sounds like they have 2 routes or 2 choices.
2 avenues depending on what they choose to do, ADUs or pursuing the multifamily development there. And
so pursuing the multifamily unit, they would not have to go back to commercial.
no, it's a mixed-use property, so they would have to develop it in adherence of the East Valley specific plan. We have a mixed-use overlay which allows you to have residential and commercial within that property, but it would be subject to the standards within the East Valley specific plan.
And if they did like the ambulance, residency or whatever, I assume that's the logic behind if you wanted to make it mixed use, then it would technically be commercial if it was like an ambulance driver residence or whatever the property
rest
was
area.
in that effect. Yeah, the rest area. I assume that's the logic of it, of course.
To continue that mixed use?
Right, yeah.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the use was converted from commercial to residential at some point in time after the conditional use permit was in place.
Correct. So all we have is, again, referring to attachment 3, 2 residential units on site are the only residential units that we have on record. The 5 additional have been unpermitted.
Can you define non-conforming use for me?
Yes, sir. Non-conforming is a legally permitted structure. So at one time or at one point, it adhered to whatever code was in adherence at that time, or was subject to, and at that time, it met all the requirements and development standards associated with that, and was permitted by a city or an agency, which would grandfather in if there was a change in zoning where new development standards are applied to structures or uses within that area.
Is there something that would prevent these structures from being grandfathered into said compliance?
The structures themselves are permitted. What's the subject is the use, the uses that have been
Right,
changed.
Let me ask a clarification question on what you just said.
Yes, sir.
Non-conforming, legal non-conforming, as I'm understanding what you said, is, for example, something is constructed, it goes through the process of approval, it's constructed according to that approval. Later, the codes change. It is no longer conforming to the current code. However, it falls under its previous, constructed approval. That does not include if someone chooses to make an alteration, unpermitted alteration, that does not render it legal non-conforming, correct?
You can modify with the nonconformity, being a nonconforming either use or structure. You can do small modifications limited to about 25%. So there is an avenue to permit additions or alterations to those structures or uses. However, you do have to go through that permitting process.
Right. So if you do not go through that permitting process, it isn't conforming. Correct? Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Now, as a follow-up to that question, if that's the case, if you've gone through and you've altered a structure and you haven't gone through the process, or let's say the previous owner hasn't and you purchased the property, you did not perform that alteration, but it is still non-conforming and it isn't legal, it strictly, there's nothing that grants it legality other than going through the proper process as it should have been gone through originally, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, as the new owner, that violation is upon you.
Correct. Okay.
So if the new owner did not come to you or nobody complained, you wouldn't have known that that building has been modified before the new owner bought it.
That's correct.
So a complaint is what was needed.
Well, the complaint, actually, they submitted a plan stating that the commercial had been converted to residential, which is how we responded in the email, just noticing that that was incorrect. We didn't have any permits to support those change in occupancy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the board to direct to staff?
None for me.
Okay. Before we go into deliberation, I'd like to then go ahead and invite. We have three, you said?
Yes,
for
three
comment?
speakers, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, first we have Sarah Zeiler.
Hi, I'm Rick Seiler's wife, and we've been married for 24 years and raised our family in the area. Our kids went to Classical Academy High School, and I'm just kind of here to be a, pardon me?
I'm an alumni.
You're a Cayman. One of them is serving at the U.S. Air Force Academy. We're super proud, good kids and good family. I'm a little nervous too. It's also very emotional because every day I watch my husband get up excited to go and work on these rental properties. And it's not because he's trying to take advantage of people. This particular property, he moved a homeless family in from their car through the Salvation Army program. I've watched him help mothers flee abusive homes and give them furniture to come in to get away from spouses with their kids. He's visited kids in the hospital who have illness. He's cut breaks on rent. I mean, he's not here trying to be a slumlord and take advantage of people. If you look at this property or any other property that he puts his, touch on, they're gorgeous. He doesn't have to do it. They could have taken this property. They could have moved people into this run-down, unsafe building that it was for decades. In fact, even your current mayor's family member lived in that property for many years. He could do that as much as he wanted. So could Tony, who I've known for 20 years. We've raised our kids together. And they don't. They make them like diamonds in the rough. If you drive down Valley Parkway and you look at that corner on Beach Street, you're going to see an example of what more rental property owners should be doing with these in the community. And so, on the other hand, you drive up and down streets of Escondido where there's 8 cars parked in the front yard, multiple doors of entry, dishes, lots of unsafe housing, and that just doesn't apply here. And so, whether it's an axe to grind, and sometimes, I've always wondered why when you're going in and renovating a property, whether it's your own home, if you've ever done it, and that code enforcement person who's hardworking, and we understand the intent, you know, their job is a huge responsibility, but you always kind of, like, you're nervous because you feel like you've done something wrong, even when you're just trying to do something right. And it's always been the case in this with this particular code enforcement person, where, you know, if Rick was going out and he's like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna have an issue, and I feel like everything's buttoned up, and I'm begging to just, you know, move forward with these plans. And there's a lot of prohibitive it's like you're guilty until proven innocent. And that just shouldn't be the case when you're trying to create housing, especially in a place like Escondido, where there are many people sleeping on the streets right now. And we're working with Salvation Army, Section 8 programs, taking people in, and this is affordable housing by San Diego standards, the most expensive place to live in the country. And we're arguing over a building that was zoned as an ambulance building and a commercial space. Like, we don't need more commercial space. The thought of spending money to convert a property that's been illegally used for decades as residential property, and now expecting somebody who's put hard-earned dollars into it to create nicer housing for more people, and then, oh, you got to convert it back to commercial. It just seems like roadblocking instead of let's put people in homes. And so I know that that's his mission every day, and so if I'm shaky and I feel passionate, come off as emotional, it's because it's what he does, and he loves it. He worked in office for 20 years, and he decided this was a huge change, and he learned, and he took people, and he worked with people, and he takes phone calls 24 hours a day from tenants.
Thank you, Ms. Seiler. Unfortunately, your time has expired.
So that's my character.
Next, we have Rick Seiler. Rick Seiler, yes.
I'm going to make it short because anything that I say is probably going to be very emotional too. And I have been doing this for many years now. I've owned properties all over San Diego, actually all over California. And I'd just like to ask Mr. Jacobson how many of my properties he's actually gone to. In Escondido, the answer is all of them. All of them. Sorry.
Calm down.
And you want to invest in a city? Sorry, I'll take my tone down. You want to spend millions of dollars in a city where you're being persecuted and blamed for creating this housing? I invite all of you board members, I beg you, please, and I'll give you a list. Go to any one of my properties. They're the cleanest, they're the best built. Every single, when it pertains to 325, 333 North Beach, there is no violations on that property. They're making it up. It's made up. I invite you, I'll take you personally, each one of you, whenever you want, day or night, I'll take you. You can meet our tenants. You can bang on the walls. You can measure the fire code. You can see that the tree's not touched. The tree isn't even our tree. It's a neighbor's tree. I'm trimming the neighbor's tree because Stephen requires it. I asked him, is everything okay? We went through the 18 items that Mr. Jacobson claimed that we were doing wrong. We corrected every one of them. We sent back, and by the way, their health and safety, their emergency health and safety. Every item was taken care of. Did we get a response? Zero response. It's with the city attorney's office now, sir. We can't talk about it. I want to quickly bring something up before I get off. How many seconds do I have left?
You got 45.
Yeah. On my property on North Ash Street, Mr. Jacobson set out, and Brenna set out a search warrant. How they got it approved by the judge, you should wear a magician hat. It's unbelievable. The property is brand new. It's literally brand new. The building inspector approved it less than a year ago. Now they're doing a search warrant on it. You should see the video I have. 6 police officers, multiple fire people, health, sanitation, all of these different things. For a brand new building, you're walking into my tenants' places uninvited when they're naked and sick. This is what happened. I have it. So again, zero violations. They didn't even send me a letter. It's all permitted. So I look at this, and he has a vendetta against me. He has it. You can laugh and whatever you want, but I'm telling you this. I have proof of it. I can show you video of it. I've shown Zach video of it. There's 6 police officers standing around my property while they're barging in to a sick 65-year-old woman who's naked, and she doesn't know what she doesn't know what the heck is going on. So when I'm emotional, yeah, I protect my tenants, I protect my property, they're always clean, and I want to take you guys on a field trip. I will take you on a field trip to see them all.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Zeiler. Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie. Adam? That's our final speaker.
Hi, thank you. I'm a friend of Tony Strout's. I just wanted to just kind of reiterate some of the things we didn't really get to talk about in the slide, but or his presentation, but we were never provided any evidence of a complaint, even though we were asked multiple times. And, you know, even the DCA just said that there was no permit for this construction. We've said many times there's no construction, and it's just not getting through. And I also really encourage you to read the conditional use permit from 1994 that planning just said that there's 2 residential units. There's also a 2-bedroom unit on there that they seem to want to claim as temporary. There's nowhere in that conditional use permit from 1994 that ever says that's temporary. It is another unit, another residential unit. So I really encourage you to read all of this. We didn't get to go through hardly any of the violations that don't exist and the proof that they don't exist, but it is all in that binder. You know, there's the fire extinguishers, the 75 feet away. It's all absolutely ridiculous that all of the, you know, Mr. Jacobson would try to take pictures and keep it so that the fire extinguisher wouldn't show in the photo. It's all very interesting. There's CO2 and smoke detectors in every apartment, and he said that they weren't there, but they're all there, and all the residents would tell you they're there, and there's pictures of them there. There's pictures of him walking right past them. It's a little, I mean, they get very emotional, and we're all very emotional because it's almost like a bad nightmare, really. So I encourage you to read through a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further public comments.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and, at this point, the board we have the opportunity to deliberate on the items at hand, and we can converse with each other, or you can share your perspectives. I would like also for us to maybe briefly, just in very brief manner, sort of highlight our role in this matter. And maybe if I attempt to do that, maybe you can clarify me if I'm misguided somewhat. But as I understand our role, so before we go into this deliberation, and this is for the benefit of the appellant as well. I think I'm speaking for myself, but hopefully I represent the board as well, and they can clarify their points of view. But this board is made up of citizens in the city of Escondido. We are not employees of the city. We're here to represent and support the city at large, the city, people like you. And I would hope that each one of us, I certainly can speak for myself in saying, my heart goes out to the individual, to the homeowner, to the resident of the city that is trying to do something. And, you know, motives aside, I assume everybody's trying to do what they think is the right thing and the good thing for themselves and for everybody else. Sometimes in the course of that, there are so many players involved in all of these complicated processes that we all have to go through that it can come to a loggerhead sometimes, and it's difficult. Our role as a board is to say, hey, if there is ambiguity or confusion or misinterpretation or miscommunication, hopefully this is a forum for you or any public member to receive some consideration and some guidance and hopefully some clarification on that. Our role is not to overwrite the code or to give special treatment to anyone, of course. So having said that, anything else that I hope I didn't step on any toes by
Yeah, that's an accurate assessment. I don't know if I see
I
you
could
trying
also
to.
just clarify, if I would, and the Assistant City Attorney, Dara Delano, for those of you who don't know my role, because we don't have our little tags here. The question, just a reminder to the board that the question before you all this evening is whether the appellant has presented grounds for an appeal. So your role is to either grant the appeal or deny the appeal tonight. And so he has had the burden to present facts that would allow you to make that decision. So I'm happy to clarify anything, if you guys have further legal questions that come up as you're deliberating, I'm happy to help with those too.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And if I may ask, ma'am, the specific appeal is that these structures are compliant.
No, so let me clarify that what's being appealed is the notice and order to abate a public nuisance. So that October 31st notice and order to abate a public nuisance lays out the grounds for that order, and that is what's being appealed.
The public nuisance with regards to trash on the property, fire hydrants, smoke detectors, you know.
All of those items, but the overarching issue in that notice is the failure to have permitted structures, to have permitted use there. So I know when Brenna was speaking, she mentioned that the city code, the municipal code, does, I'm trying to get my notes here. Yeah, it specifically states that all buildings have to be permitted, all use, residential uses need to be permitted, and the failure or refusal or neglect to obtain a permit is a prima facie evidence of public nuisance. And so that's really the overarching issue, is that failure to get a permit.
Yes, ma'am.
I would.
I'm sorry, this is board deliberation time. It's not.
How does she get to? She's not part of the board.
The board
And
can
she made a
the board
mistake
can
in
ask
that.
questions only. So
Well,
this
she
is,
just gave an opinion as to
this
what
is
was
the
being
board's
appealed,
time.
and that's not what's being
It's
appealed.
the board's time.
Okay.
I would like to just clarify something. They voted 2022, for instance, and it had 7 units, but they were not permitted because 1994 permits showed only 5 or whatever the 2 units were. So now the issue is they cannot grandfather whatever was done to that building before owning it, and they have to go through the process, even if they have not done themselves that work, they have to go through the process of permitting, and that's what the code is requiring. Am I right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I believe staff said there's nothing that prevents them from obtaining, in fact, they outlined 2 routes to obtain the goals, but they need to go through the process to obtain them. And that I believe, is the category that you explained, which is is categorized as a public nuisance when it's non-conforming, correct?
When it's not permitted. correct?
Non-permitted.
There
and
are
not-
health and safety issues that are being appealed. There's 16
I'm sorry,
items listed that are being
this is
appealed.
not time.
Okay, but she made a statement that is untrue.
This is the board's time, please.
Okay, I apologize.
And we did submit plans.
Further deliberation from the board, any other comments or thoughts?
So the specific appeal is with regards to the buildings, being permitted for commercial, the appeal is, when we bought them at that time, that they were already, residential, as I understand it.
That is not the appeal we filed, if you read the appeal.
The violation is that the violation is that they are not permitted.
The evicted
That is
tenants for
a
health and
violation that we're discussing, is that there are 5 not permitted modifications. Whether they predate the current ownership or not is not really the question. It's whether there are unpermitted structures.
And correcting the violation is not an issue here, right?
It's
It's
possible.
not the code the code violation.
So those are also, so let me just to clarify a little bit. So if you turn to page 12 of your staff report, actually, I think this was the staff report, so it might be page 15. That's actually the appeal form that was filed. So just to clarify what the appeal is, the appellant filed this form, which states what he's appealing. If you see, it says state specifically what is being protested. And he states everything in the notice to abate letter dated October 31st, 2024. And that notice and order is starting on the next page. And that is the order that lists all the violations that the city identified. And so that's what's being appealed. And all of those violations, we've discussed, a number of them, the smaller issues like the fire sprinklers, those kinds of code violations, but the overarching issue is the permitting. Hopefully that helps to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, adding fire extinguishers is easy to do, same with CO2 detectors. It sounds like they may have already done that.
If they were done prior to the violation is my point.
Yeah, and that's what's being appealed, is the 16 items that he listed on here, and I didn't get to do my closing things.
I'm sorry, this is the board's time to discuss.
Okay, but
It's board
she's
deliberation, please.
She's not on the board though,
Our
sir.
appeal said?
When the board can ask questions of who they choose.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Go ahead.
The way I see it, there were the 16 violations that came in on October the 31st letter. The most important is number 1, which is the legality of whatever was done to the building. And the others are simple, they can be modified and changed if they are health and safety or whatever. But it says up to 5 residential units and the storage room were constructed without the required building department's review and permits.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
So that's the most important item. Everything else can be done, health and safety, whatever it is. But this has also to be done.
I agree with you, except I would clarify that number 1 is also health and safety, because the building codes are health and safety.
But the permitting is all what we are talking about, that they need to go back and proceed with obtaining permits to whatever has been done. We cannot grandfather what was done before when they voted. That's my understanding.
Yeah, our role is not to overturn the code. That is not our role. So 16 items, as you point out, there are some that are of large consequence, like item number 1, but all 16 of these items, I guess the question for us is, has any rationale been presented that would cause us to has a case been presented to us that would cause us to have any rationale for approving the appeal? Thank you. Yeah. And that would include all of the items, unless we, I guess, would comment on, I guess, individual items. Any deliberation on any of these other items? If not, I would suggest, I would like to, I guess, share my thoughts before I share, before I come to my decision on this. and certainly the other board members are welcome to do the same if they choose. I tried to, as I approached this tonight, I tried to say, I tried to boil down what your arguments were, and then ask myself, has any rationale been presented in my mind that would say, yeah, there are grounds here for taking a second look at this and supporting an appeal to this. I can't get past the idea that, quite simply, I understand, you may not have made these changes to your structure. That doesn't absolve the responsibility to go through the process and obtain a legal permit for the changes, even if you didn't construct them. The city's under obligation, should somebody file a complaint, the city is obligated, as I understand it, to inspect and to follow up on that complaint. And if there is a violation, they are obligated to notice that. From what I have seen, there has been no submittal, as was requested by the city, no submittal of plans in a formal manner that the city could take in.
Hold on, I'm sorry. That's just ridiculous.
Stop.
As
It doesn't matter.
the city presented, the city presented that these plans were submitted to a planner in an email, which is not the process to submit plans.
If you read the email, that's how they said to submit it. It's in there.
Even if somebody suggested that is not a proper submittal.
We just followed their instructions.
So the process of submitting plans, I don't find any time that actually took place.
They put in their email that it did take place, but they wanted us to do
And
major
the,
plots.
and the city also suggested that they would not be able to intake the plans because of the existing nonconformances that were listed on the plans themselves. So, as I see this, no formal submittal has taken place to date of the non-permitted structures. I don't know how we could ever do anything about that other than support the city's position that those structures need to be permitted.
I asked you to go through all 16 items and make a ruling on each item.
This is the board's time. This is the board's time.
Well, that's my appeal.
Are there any other board members that would like to state their positions or have comment?
I have perhaps some questions for Mr. Zeiler, Mr. Strauch, as well as some comments. I understand that the meat of the argument here is the 5 residential units that have been zoned as commercial. When I look through, I see some of the other ones, like the tree, Mr. Zeiler, that you mentioned that was not on your property, to my knowledge, and that kind of thing. If I may ask Mr. Strauch or Mr. Zeiler, if you guys are in the process of perhaps trying to rezone said property as the multifamily unit, ma'am, that you were talking about, or anything like that. As I understand your set of emails with the city attorney's office or the planning division, have been more or less reactionary. You hear about a fire, you attempt to put it at, not like a proverbial fire, you attempt to put it out, that kind of thing. I imagine that you might not be in such a position of trying to switch over the zoning to multifamily residential yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, there's been nothing to change the zoning because it's not required to change it. And I'll remind you again that prior to purchasing this property, we went in and asked the city, the senior planner, what do we do? What do we need to do? No, you're fine. So how can you say we didn't do anything? They told us this is what the property is. And I clearly stated, if there's any issues, I just won't buy it. No, you're fine. This is fine. We followed them. Exactly what the city said to do. Then we agreed to submit plans. We did do a formal submission, exactly like they said. And then Mr. Jacobs' own email says, oh, we didn't get it, here's how we want you to send it. We send it in. Then they say, okay, we got it, but we don't think we can take it. So we submitted formal plans exactly like they said. We have a property that they said we could keep exactly like we said. So, and I would ask you too, if you're gonna go through those, rule on each one of those items individually as to what is right, what is wrong. If you wanna say some are wrong and we did something wrong, great. But look at the whole thing globally and please make a decision on each individual item. Because we've provided proof of every single one, even if you disagree with some of them.
And furthermore, we hired an architect, we hired engineers, we hired people to submit the plans. We actually did submit the plans. We drew them, we submitted them. That's the process. How else do you submit plans?
We can't force the city to take our application, just like another one of Rick's things. They sit there for a year and did nothing. They refused to even look at them. They're there until an attorney got involved and said, look, you have to do this. The next day they were approved. They intentionally, purposely, and maliciously won't do anything. So again, I just ask you to rule on each one of those things and we'll deal with the other ones.
By the way, we're not opposed to getting everything permitted.
That's what we've tried to do.
Yes, we've tried. They won't accept it. So what do you do?
So you applied to switch it to a multifamily residential?
No, we applied under the rules of law under the ADUs to approve them as ADUs, which is perfectly fine to do.
And that's applicable for what's zoned as commercial. They can't have the ADUs under the new Senate bills.
I'm gonna let, if you're asking me that question,
Yes,
I'd like to refer that to the principal planner.
So the submittal process that we currently have, the applicant submitted an inquiry requesting that they have 2 ADUs on site, where we saw they have 5 residential units already, or 7 residential units already existing, 2 that were permitted.
Yes.
That was that process. We kicked that back, did not deem it complete, because what they had as part of that was 1 additional ADU more than what would be permitted at that location. And also, we kicked it back because they were proposing residential units for a conversion from commercial space to residential that wasn't permitted at that time, or that hasn't been permitted. So the ADU that they submitted for, we did not deem that complete and responded that they had to do the following. Either convert the residential units that they had on site back to commercial, and we could review for ADU permitting, or if they wanted to pursue more residential units on site, then they would have to go through the major plot plan process. So there's 2 avenues for them to pursue. Either it's the ADU process or the multifamily process for developing that site.
And even if they did the second of those options, though, the already 5 structures would be the 2, or no, because they're not ADUs.
2 of them.
Would be 2 of the 5. Or would 2 of them out of 5 would be what would be allowed, is basically.
We'd have to go through the review process, but they haven't submitted either one of those for us to actually review and, apply our development standards to.
Yes, sir.
Question, the submittal, or the pre-submittal, was related to an ADU. And the other structures that were non-permitted were not submitted as part of the submittal, they were submitted as existing?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what their site plan
Okay.
shows.
And that's why you couldn't accept it?
Correct.
One of the reasons?
Yes.
Because they were shown as an existing, but it was not.
It was never
It
permitted
was never
to be residential from commercial.
Okay.
Would you like to follow up with that?
If I may ask what your follow-up is, sir?
So on the plans that were submitted, it references the Senate bill numbers and the Assembly bill numbers on the plan stating why those units could legally be there.
But they still need to be permitted.
That's what the submission of the plans were for the permits.
I believe the planner
We just
said
that we didn't reference them on there and we didn't address those. They absolutely were completely addressed and legally why on the plan.
So
Were they?
Was that not on
Did
there?
we reference them?
And the Senate bills that apply?
Say you don't
Now,
know.
If you would read the rest of my
the
binder.
question that I asked the planner was, The question that I asked the planner was if those were a submittal or if those were shown as existing, and the answer was they were shown as existing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
My only comment would be, I'm sorry about how, I know the North Ash Street property is not respective to this one here. I'm sorry about how this is all, developed out. I'm sorry for my absence last week and how that might have cost, many of you your valuable time. I know, all of our time is valuable here. It seems to me, that, the last 15 you were not, in violation of it. Take a glance over the tree, the trash and debris that you've spoken about earlier. My only real concern would be, the number one, argument there. I now understand that it would incur significant financial costs. If you had to go back to commercial, I see that as a non-option. I appreciate what you guys have
But
done.
it's a pattern.
Rick?
Sorry.
No, yeah, I do understand that. I imagine that it's not respective here to ask about the video of the North Ash Street.
I would love to show it to you.
It's not relevant.
If it's not relevant to our work, then I don't think it's our scope.
I have the videos of this property and everything that's transpired. If you like, I play them.
That's not the issue at hand here.
Okay.
You might be
All right.
right, and if you might
All
be
right.
correct on this, it's not an issue at hand.
I would
Well, it actually references
I would
all.
ask you, please, to not comment unless you are being asked a
Okay,
question
sorry.
by the board.
Okay, sorry.
Any further questions or deliberation? If not, I would like to extend a motion. I motion to adopt resolution number 2020-401 denying the appeal of the building official's issuance of amended notice and order to abate a public nuisance.
Second the motion.
Call for a vote.
Voting is open. Use your iPad touchscreen to hit the refresh button, and you can log your vote. And please hit submit after you've made your selection.
Let me make sure I understand the vote. The vote as motioned
Not what the order is.
would be a yay and a nay would.
A motion to, if you were to vote yes, then you are voting in approval of your motion, which
Okay.
was to deny the appeal. So
Just-
you're voting
just so that's clear.
yes to deny the appeal.
Did you vote on the fact that they never legally notified
Please,
us?
I
No,
asked
I'm asking,
you to
please.
please not comment unless you've been
Because
You
addressed.
didn't even vote on
You
what is at hand. It's not what you just read. But that's fine, that's fine, just leave it.
And Vice Chairman McCall, did you hit the submit button?
Oh, we get to take
Fresh. I just want to make sure it's logged.
You've already made the motion? No more questions, nothing like that?
It's been seconded.
It's been seconded. There's a vote. We have 2 votes logged currently. Michael Delaney. And Commissioner McCall, I just want to make sure your iPad is working properly. Motion approved, 5-0. The appeal was denied.
Do we have any other items?
No other items on the agenda, just
Okay.
adjournment.
All right. With no other items, the meeting is adjourned.